Good morning, everyone. So we have today Dr. Farzaneh Badiei with us. She is right now founder and CEO of Global Medusa. She has previously served as Director for Social Media Governance Initiative at Yale Law School. She was formerly Executive Director of Internet Governance Project at Georgia Institute of Technology and School of Public Policy. She has done her Ph.D. from University of Hamburg Institute of Law and Economics. Prior to her Ph.D., she has done an LLB and LLM. Thank you, Farzaneh, for agreeing to give us your interview. And, to set up the tone, I would request you to give a brief idea about your academic journey, how this shift from law to internet governance and expertise, it all happened.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for the invitation, and it's a pleasure to be here. When I was doing my master's degree in England, I became very interested in how you resolve disputes online. PayPal at the time, and this is like, yeah, long time ago. So we used, like, PayPal was a new thing, and these payments intermediaries, eBay, and later on Amazon. So I became very interested in how do they actually resolve these disputes online, because the transactions were more transporter, and where do you go if you have a problem with the merchandise that was posted from Italy and you're in the UK, and and the merchandise is not worth that much to go to Italy and lodge a complaint. So I became very interested in that. But then the shift was when I became very interested, and I started doing research, and I did my dissertation on online dispute resolution. And then I started working at the Internet Governance Forum, which is the United Nation. It's convened under the United Nations, and I worked at the Secretariat, and that's where I got a lot of exposure to all the discussions that were going on about Internet governance, what Internet governance is, and there was at the time there was a network there, an academic network called GigaNet, and it's still there. And the professors had professors and students who did internet governance and studied internet governance. They also, they convened this, and they would have meetings at Internet Governance Forum a day before, and they were usually very active as civil society and academics in Internet Governance Forum. I then I did my PhD at Hamburg University about online market intermediaries, and still in law, and I saw the intersection between the law and how it applies to the online intermediaries. And the fact was that because at the time, well, we keep saying this, which I like, and I now dispute, but at the time, no specific law would apply to these intermediaries, or there was only like one law. Like if they were like incorporated in the US, it was like that law. So they came up with kind of regime. It was called the private governance regime. That was very interesting to study. So this is how I became very interested in how the governance of these intermediaries work, and the general internet, how the governance of the internet worked by working at the Secretariat, and also becoming familiar with the GigaNet.
Okay, thanks. Now, Farzaneh, how do you, see the issue of digital exclusion globally when you talk about, redressal or accessibility, or barriers when we talk about, developing countries And especially because when I was doing my own research, there was a lot of discussion on digital divide, and with the notion that accessibility can be provided if we provide the infrastructure. And from last 2 years, like, I'm based in outskirts of India, I'm trying to collect data. And so I see, only infrastructure accessibility is not the problem, not the solution. There are various facets to this problem. How do you see the whole idea of digital exclusion, and how do you think that it can be overcome? Because UN has been working extensively with ways, and they come up with reports and all. How do you see the problem?
So I look at well, mm, just to be a little bit nitpicky, I don't know if it's like digital exclusion or if it's like no action to include. If we are like talking about like actively people like excluding others from access to the internet, which is a very interesting thing to look at. But I think there are like two issues here. There is like inaction to include people, and there is also like actively excluding people from having access to the internet. What I look when I look at the inclusivity and digital divide that happens around the world, I look at it. I prefer to look at it as not a country-specific issue, but a community issue. Because then we are going to, and I understand why we look at this as why our unit of analysis most of the time is the country around the world, but because they are in charge of the infrastructure, and if the governments are excluded from, like they are not able to provide the infrastructure, then in effect the whole country is affected. But I prefer to also like look at it from the community perspective. Communities in one country, they don't have the same incentives, the same needs and requirements, and also some of them are well resourced and they are powerful, and some of them are not powerful. So if we look at the digital divide, by looking at vulnerable communities around the world and not look at it merely as like a country-specific issue, we might be able to actually help those who don't have access to the internet, or have like less access to the internet. I'm not saying that we should not look at it from like a country-specific perspective, but we need to really focus on how we give access to communities, and how communities are excluded from the internet because of our policies, because of, I'm originally Iranian, and I work a lot on the issue of sanctions, and, how the powerful, rich countries laws can affect certain countries and communities to have access to the internet infrastructure. And so I looked at it in this mixed way of country analysis, but as well as like community analysis.
Okay.
And it's a very broad issue. So when you talk about digital inclusion, what do you mean exactly? Do we mean infrastructure? Do we mean like there are like a broad issue of like services on the internet? But that's internet governance for you. It's a very broad.
No, so, the whole idea behind putting this question was because every time from last 6-7 years, when we do the research, and I have been personally facing it. I see, when we see, UN reports, when we go through it, so a lot of discussion is about accessibility, providing accessibility towards the infrastructure. But when you talk about excluding certain section of society, intentionally, and that part is not even discussed academically. If you are someone from a marginalized section would want to talk about it academically in dissertation, or if you want to have a chapter about it where people can study about how things happen and how things are happening, and in a sense that people learn from their past mistake and they can make sure it doesn't happen in future. That's somewhere we have not touched upon globally, which I feel it's uniform even in Europe, everywhere in India. So how do you see that aspect?
So the digital exclusion, like when you purposefully exclude a community from access to the internet. Yes, so we discussed that in the framework of internet shutdowns, when the government just shut down the internet, and sometimes they do it like in certain areas of the country that there is like an uprising and they don't want them to have access to the internet. So that's one country specific digital exclusion. But of course, as we know, it's not only countries that exclude communities. There are also tech corporations that for a variety of reasons, they either have to comply with the law, so they have to like exclude communities from having access to infrastructure and having access to their services, or it's like they're being risk averse, so they want to kind of like they don't want to serve certain communities because they might be affected and their profit making might be affected. So for digital exclusion, like intentional digital exclusion, I can see like there are actors are. I see one of the most important problems is the government internet shutdowns. And the other is the tech corporations, either intentionally excluding a community for a variety of reasons and incentives, and another is that they have to like comply with the law, so they just like exclude that community. And the problem is that and maybe this is why the academia cannot really look at this study and study it well, is that they are not very transparent. Corporations and the governments are not very transparent about who they exclude, when they work together to exclude a certain community from having access to infrastructure. And then also there are now that this might be a little bit controversial, but I think it might be interesting to mention. So if you remember several years ago, there was Facebook wanted to bring limited internet to India and to communities that didn't have access to the internet, if I'm not mistaken. So, and then there was a lot of outcry by the digital advocates, and then in the end, Facebook did not go ahead with the plan. If I'm not, I think that there are some zero rating services now, but at the time, the civil society advocates saw this as a victory. That Facebook decided to just not to do it, and to be honest, I wonder if that's digital exclusion or not, because providing them with like limited internet, isn't that better than not having access at all? But that's just a question. I'm not here to defend this. This is a very controversial.
I think I'll give you a heads up. I think recently, I forgot the name of the author, but recently, probably I read it in Guardian or somewhere. So they came up with a whole disclosure, how this whole idea of free internet, basic internet service that Facebook was planning to launch in India. So they were not successful in India, but they actually were successful in Myanmar. So they did a research how the whole majoritarian perspective reached out to the grassroots level in Myanmar and everything that happened, and how Facebook played a role into it. So I agree, it's something that needs further discussion. Now, I was going through your research, recent publications and work, and something which was very interesting was, you touched upon the whole notion how generic domain names get affected when, sanctions come into existence. And you were actually writing about Afghanistan. And so, I just wanted to have a perspective, because like, I'm not pretty good in Persian, to be very honest, but then every time I see the Iranian model, the way they have been coping up with the sanctions, and since you come from Iran, how, like, you must be having a brief idea. So when you talk about internet as a platform, and they must be having their own generic platforms, which is not usually discussed in the mainstream Western media, and I'm sure they must be having their own set of platforms, digital platforms. How they come up with kind of solutions, how they come up with internet people participation on internet, when we'll see kind of sanctions even they have faced in past and they are facing right now.
So basically, unfortunately, sanctions can empower and reinvigorate this government idea that, you see, the West is not is ignoring us. They're not giving us access to their services. So now we have to come up with our own solutions, and this is the low, and also, like, they're filtering and blocking and all sorts of things that they do, and they're kind of like localizing a lot of data that is being justified by look what these governments are doing, and they're excluding us, so we have to come up with this. With these solutions. So this is the unfortunate part of sanctions, that it doesn't even help other countries. It doesn't even help with solving the problems that these countries are struggling with, and doesn't fix any problem, but it affects people and their access to the internet. Now, the Iranian government came up with various ideas about how to come up with these alternative platforms, and some of them picked up and they worked, and to their surprise, some of them didn't. So, for example, the search engines that we see being used in Iran, still it's Google and other big corporations and American corporations, because there was a general license that during Obama they passed this general license that allowed non-commercial communication not to be affected by sanctions in sanctioned countries. So they use Google and other search engines, but some other apps that are more local, and applications that you have to be incorporated in those countries and need to have a payment intermediary as well. They became more local. For example, they have another app other than Uber. Uber doesn't work there. And these things get picked up. So they came up with a bunch of solutions that some of them worked and some of them didn't. And I think that for the search engines, because you need to have that technical expertise, you need to also have access to big data and all sorts of things. Even the European Commission, they came up with this search app and search engine, I think it was in 2007, and it didn't pick up. And the other thing that the Iranian government, and also we need to distinguish between what really can help, or what the Iranian government claims that will help access. So what data localization might not help, as with access as they claim, because but it might also like increase surveillance, and so these are the things that we need to be aware of, and we need to look at when we study access. The other thing is that the other solution that I think that the advocates and academics need to look at, and especially now that Afghanistan is going to unfortunately have these problems too, is to see what we can do globally to decrease the effect of sanction on access to infrastructure in these countries, because these sanctions, they don't really have have impact on access of the governments and the states. They have impact on people.
Yeah, true. Oh, okay, but when you whole discussion, I was observing, do we have kind of litigations, regulatory reforms in Iran? Because when I was comparing in my previous research, because we had this personal data protection bill in India, and now it's data protection bill, and they are still pondering upon it about user data rights in India. And then you had GDPR in European Union. So what I felt was more or less every country was trying to have a regulatory authority over the user data to the in a way it best serves their own interest. So now when we see that, how do you see, when you talk about global coalition and cooperation in terms of sanctions to safeguard these domain registrations, in a sense that and the end user is not in a catch-22 situation, the businesses run and they flourish. How do you see the lack of regulatory reforms at a global level, something which is uniformly accepted by different countries, which is not there right now? How do you see, where do we need to work upon, especially in digital humanities section?
So we need to be wary of where we actually need regulation and how it's possible, what's the best tool that we have in order to govern the internet. And when we talk about internet governance, it's such a complex system. It's not like one thing. Like there are like all aspects of the internet, the operational aspect, and it happens like around the corners of the internet that we can't just like, it's not like regulating trains, or I know that we love to do these analogies, and I do it as well. It's familiar. It's more familiar, but the problem is that the internet is not like one thing that it's not it's a complex system, but the governance of it happens like all across the internet and by different actors. And sometimes and this is why we could not like regulate it for a long time. A lot of aspects of the internet we could not even regulate it. And then so there are some aspects that cannot be regulated. We need to come up with this, like we need to have this we call it multi-stakeholder model. And multi-stakeholder model of governance is that the actors and the communities that are then the stakeholders that are affected by the different aspects of governance of the internet, for example, domain name governance, they get together and they come up with policies, and governments work with them too. So, and that's the beauty of it. So it depends on really what we are talking about when we are talking about regulation and internet governance. Are we talking about, so you mentioned like data privacy. And that is also a very difficult, it was very difficult to regulate it. And, the directive on data protection that the European Union came up with, it was in 1995. Yeah. It took them many years to be able to come up with a law after the development of the internet, that come up with a law that was effective. I mean, more or less, there are disputes about that, but that was effective, and it was transnational. And this is the one of the advantages of a GDPR. Well, in some people's view, it's advantage, and some it's not. It's a disadvantage. Sometimes, you exclude people. I remember that after GDPR went into effect, and I think it was LA. There was a newspaper in LA that did not give access to users in Europe after GDPR came into effect, because I don't want to comply with this law, and I'm just not going to deal with the European users, and which is not a solution, which cannot be a solution for other services. This is why I say that it is different if you are a CDN. You can't really say that if you're a content delivery network that you're dealing with traffic. You can't say, oh no, I'm not gonna facilitate the so it depends on what we are regulating. If it's something local that you can regulate, well, then if going through court and through your like regulatory system and stuff like that, it might be like more accountable even. But if it's something global and it has to be, it will affect global connectivity, then there might be like other ways to govern those aspects, and we call them like multi-stakeholder. It can be multi-stakeholder governance. It can also be also network governance. A lot of like we have network cybersecurity, especially is really a different stakeholders get together to resolve the issue, because it is not possible to regulate. So this is, I think that what you asking kind of like triggers this question. What is the landscape of current regulatory models on the internet, and is it enough? Do we need more, or do we need to work on the multi-stakeholder and other governance mechanisms?
Yeah, true. Because I'll discuss that in my next question. Now coming to your, because you have been writing, you have written about the governance model or proposed governance model to improve the functioning of platforms like Telegram. And when we study the kind of role that these platforms have played in terms of people participation and how they have been used in, if I say, in China, in America recently. So what is the best governance model? Because, even in India, we have seen a lot of curb on use of platforms by students, like the government's trying to, keep track of everything happening around. What is the best governance model for these platforms? What do you propose?
That is a very okay. So let me put it this way. So platform governance is sometimes different from internet governance, depending on the definition of internet governance. Whatever definition that you use, if you use the narrow definition of internet governance, as long as platform governance doesn't affect the internet, then that is not an internet governance issue. So I just wanted to clarify that. So this is why some governments and regulatory authorities decided that, okay, so now that we don't want to touch this part of the technical part of the internet, we are going to regulate the platforms. And the problem with that was that sometimes those laws and those regulations actually affected the technical part of the internet, which was about, because technical part of the internet is about connectivity, right? It's about openness and security. So, and when you when these regulators, just like the example of GDPR that I told you, like it could, like, you could see that GDPR might even affect that part of the internet as well, and the technical option and the interoperability that facilitates to this access to global internet. And the problem that we are facing is that we don't get to talk to the regulators much, and then they come up with these laws, especially the European Union, and which can affect this technical part. But now let me go to your platform governance questions. So what we need to consider is, when we need to consider a whole range of issues when we are regulating the platforms. Because if we are like regulating the platforms without considering that technical part, then it's going to affect it. Then it comes to, okay, so what are we regulating? What sort of platforms are we regulating? Are we talking about social media platforms? Are we talking that is just about like content use and it's more about user behavior? I mean, a lot of things are about user behavior, but you know, it's about our social interactions. And then there are the payment intermediaries, the financial, and all sorts of platforms. So we need to look at that as well. That what are we actually what are governing? What is the nature of it? And then for Telegram, in the reports that you mentioned, I suggested that we need to look at community governance, because and kind of have this like private governance mechanism, and persuade Telegram in some way to allow the communities, empower communities even more to be able to govern themselves. Because especially when it comes to platforms that want to encourage freedom of expression, they don't want to like follow authoritarian government rules, and then it will be very difficult to say that, okay, so there should be like a regulation there. And but then I think community governance might actually work better in these circumstances, because the communities know themselves and know the interactions that happen among themselves. But of course, community governance has its pitfalls. That you need some communities to become very powerful and become like, they spread disinformation around, which I have like also suggested that we need some kind of like governance mechanism that can address that as well, which we call it usually pro-social governance, which is about incentivizing people to do good, to stop violating the rules, and also report and be in charge of their community actions. So so for the platform governance, we need a variety of governance mechanisms. Depends on what sort of things we are talking about. We are talking about data protection, we're talking about user behavior, we are talking about terrorist content, which I did not mention. I can't believe I did not mention this. Like, for example, when this Christchurch call, that is an initiative that the New Zealand government with France started, and then it turned into a multi-stakeholder model. Governance model. Well, it is not a governance model, it's an initiative that it's trying to bring governments and other stakeholders together to address the issue of violent extremist content. So that's another governance model that you can use, but it has to be issue specific. And you have to also consider all sorts of technical operation that could be affected. So it's not easy, but I hope I gave you an answer.
No, but then, I agree, and it's a kind of positive way approach to look at it. But don't you think it's a way too idealistic? Because when you say multi-stakeholder options and governance model, do you see government machineries agreeing for it? They're agreeing to have every stakeholder on board? Because that's bit of way I see it is governments don't agree to it usually, which should be happening right now. I hope, yeah, I think at least you go into have given a direction and things can go ahead. Okay, so now I'll try to move towards this whole idea of, schools of internet governance and the kind of curriculum that you have been, working on. So my first question is, how do you see a coalition of School of Internet and Governance? And when you talk about their curriculum, is it supposed to be a uniform curriculum all across the globe? Or do you see it varying, demographically based upon the need and demand of the situation and the place?
So let me tell you a little bit about the schools of internet governance, and that actually the schools were very influential in my academic journey. And I think I did not mention that. I should mention it. I went to the European Summer School on Internet Governance when I worked at the IGF Secretariat, and also that was a very informative school that kind of like also like these schools don't only just give you education, they also give you a network and a support network that can support you throughout your career if you choose to become an internet governance expert or an academic. So the coalition, so these internet governance schools, they organically were created by various internet governance experts and academics that wanted to do this. And I think the first one was in Europe. It's a summer school. They are usually like for 1 week. There are different models of them, but then they started like also others started popping up around the world. So we have India School of Internet Governance, and Asia Pacific School of Internet Governance, and then there were like national ones, there were regional ones, and we have them around the globe. And they decided to do a dynamic coalition on internet governance schools at the United Nations. And then this dynamic coalition that I'm talking about is something that is an initiative that allows different actors to get together and talk about their work. So you have this coalition of internet governance school, but the IGF has other dynamic coalitions too that are run by various stakeholders. Mm-hmm. So this coalition includes at least like 22 schools on internet governance. That is not a complete list of all the internet governance schools that we have. That's what I'm working on as well. I'm also reaching out to those who teach internet governance and around the world, or have a program. It can be like a 1 day, it can be a 7 day, it can be like 6 months, to kind of like get them join the coalition. And the coalition is autonomous, so they run themselves. They talk about what sort of courses they teach. They talk about how many fellows they had, and they learn from each other. And they also like have a tool kit on how to do a school that I'm kind of like working on to facilitate for people that don't have a school or are teaching internet governance and want to see how others teach it, and or if you want to like convene a school on internet governance, how do you do it? This is what I'm working on. And now the global syllabus is just, it's not a uniform thing. It's just something that is like a guide. It's just to empower communities around the world that want to learn and teach internet governance to be able to do it easily. Because at the moment, if you want to, as you mentioned in the beginning, you know, it's a very new field, and we are still experimenting. So just to help these communities to be able to, okay, so I'm going to go to this curriculum, I'm going to go to look at this syllabus, and I'm going to look at the local problems that I have, and depending on my community problems and what I want to teach, and what this syllabus tells me, then I'm going to come up with a program to teach internet governance. So this is the nature of it. We have it, and I've tried to design it. It's a collaborative design. So if anybody has any comments on it, I'm all ears. But I've divided the modules into core modules, things that we need to know about the internet, how the internet works, how do you define internet governance, who are these actors, and then there are the elective ones. The elective ones go deep into the discussions of what are these internet governance institutions, what is internet society, what is ICANN, and Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, and you know, they discuss these things. But then also the elective ones, and as I have been compiling all the programs from academia and also from the summer schools, and also there are like specialized courses on internet governance. Diploma Foundation does it, and ISOC also has a course for legislators. So as I have been compiling them, I can totally see that depending on your region and where you're at, the issues might be different, but there are some similarities. So what I'm doing is that I'm bringing the core modules are the ones that, you know, in each school is being addressed. But the elective ones is about like the regional and more issue specific ones, like, you know, legislative efforts, for example, in Asia Pacific, or like other stuff. So they what others can do, the users of this syllabus, they can look at, okay, so these are the core modules that I have to teach, and then they can look at the elective ones and see how they want to design their elective. And by elective, I don't mean that the student, it's elective for the student. I mean that it's elective for the school or the organizer. That how they want to like design it so that it is custom made to their own needs and their community needs. Okay. And yeah, sorry, just one more thing. Also, there's a list of faculty from around the world and what topics they teach. So that it can make it easier for people if they want to have a teacher from certain region, they can approach them.
Okay. So if somebody's somebody from Tehran or somebody from India, New Delhi, they want to have like compare the course. So it's completely based upon their choice, kind of modules they want to go for. That's what you're trying to say. The course is designed in that manner.
Yeah. So if it depends on what. Yes. So it is very general. It's not. It's not a uniform thing that it's it. It's something that, you know, you can use. It can help you with, it can make your life easier and can help you teach internet governance, and you can have access to a broader network.
Yeah. Okay, Farzaneh, the thing is, when you say from India's perspective, we have data regulation which is coming up. So a student, somebody who is a new grad student who wants to have a brief idea about it, somebody, somebody who participated in one of these conferences, like I think in 2020, the India's Internet Governance School was virtual session. They had a virtual session. I think they are, coordinating in India. I think ISOC Chennai chapter is the one which coordinated in 2020. Now, when we see, comparing it with, Tehran, you have people who want to get into, and there also the government is working upon data protection regulation. So does the coursework include basic tenets of these regulatory frameworks, or is it more of a, basic ideas are there, but these aspects are not there? How does it works? I'm talking about the content.
All right, yeah, I got that. Okay, so what I do is that I just collect everything that is being taught as much as I can get my hands on data. Okay. So if you tell me that, hey, in this university, they are teaching this data protection, that it has to relate to the internet, this data protection, and this is the syllabus. I get the syllabus, and well, if you give it to me, and then I will add it. But of course, it's going to have, I can create a repository so that you can have access to the whole syllabus, and I can also like create a brief data protection in India or Tehran or stuff like that. And also, like, I put materials up. I'm creating sources of, what sort of articles you can read and videos and stuff like that people can have access. But this is a short-term project.
Okay.
This is just that. This is for me. This is going to end next month. So okay. What I'm aspiring to create better, and to, like, with your help and others and the community members, so that we can have access to a bigger repository and address the things that you're saying. Have more specific content-oriented. Syllabus that can help people with also learning internet governance as well as teaching.
You know why I asked you this? Because this is I have been a bit skeptical about the digital humanities whole infrastructure, and as far as academia is concerned in India, because till date when we discuss it with faculties, so there's always a gap, in terms of critical analysis, in terms of critical review of content. So that is probably one of the reasons. We also discussed it with, I think, HIIG. We had they have this discussion forum, and I was presenting one paper there, and Humboldt says, I forgot its name. So this point came there also, that why academic institutions are not taking digital humanities, because in South Asia, because many countries, if you take global South, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, India, if I include Iran, those the countries there, they all are working upon their regulatory framework right now, and most of them are taking inspiration from GDPR, trying to blend it in a way that it helps their infrastructure. So it's kind of a phase where academic institutions don't want to come into picture. If you be very critical about any aspect, then you don't know what happens. And that is the reason why I'm asking. When you say I'm picking up course curriculum from universities, I'm very skeptical because from Indian perspective, because there are very few courses that have been run in terms of internet governance, and even the Indian School of Internet Governance, which is being run by Internet Society's Delhi chapter. They have been working from 2016, so they had I think they had certain meetings, they had their own set of fellows, but this whole notion of having a course structure, and I understand the time limitations of project. You were working it as a project, so you have your own set of boundaries you have to, and limitations and barriers. So now I ask, what about those countries where the course structure is not defined yet in major universities? How do you approach that problem?
Well, I hope that we can inspire them by this syllabus.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and they can be inspired, and because I'm also, it's not only the schools of internet governance, as I mentioned. I'm also looking at other initiatives, other academic circles, or even industry. They sometimes have these courses about trust and safety and issues like that. So what's I'm hoping that this will be exactly this. This is why we are the things that you're saying are the reasons why we're coming up with this syllabus. To help people to teach internet governance and to have access to materials, and also like get inspired by how others have done it. Not to be too influenced by it, because then a little bit of creativity is needed, but how other countries, how other regions, other communities are teaching the internet governance. And then also there are various teaching methods that go beyond syllabus, just like lecturing, which I'm covering in this report. Case-based studies or practicums and stuff like that, that might help somebody in Tehran or in India to actually shape their syllabus. But that is if they want to do that. That is sometimes we have this unfortunate problem that they don't want to teach these certain topics.
No, I understand. Now, how can academicians globally cooperate with this initiative? And I understand the project is a time-bound project, and but it's a continuous process. So how can, if somebody who's watching this interview, if I would like to contribute, so how can we approach the problem? How can we contribute to it?
Okay, so I'm going to have, so these are the short-term initiatives, and then I talk about the longer ones. So we are going to organize a webinar on teaching internet governance. And this webinar is open to everybody who is interested and has been teaching internet governance, or just wants to merely watch. So there are questions there. How do you come up with your syllabus? What topic? Why do you choose the topics that you choose for your syllabus? Because that is very important. The thought process. I think we can learn a lot. And we can. So that's one meeting that I'm organizing, and I'm going to announce it soon on LinkedIn, and of course you are all invited. And the other thing is is learning internet governance. which I don't know if I can organize it in this short time frame, but I think it's important to understand from the audience perspective what methods work. And then when we talk about legislators, and when we talk about, like, judges and these decision makers around the world, how do they learn better? How do we come up with specialized courses for them as well? So if there are any comments, or if they want to participate, and then also, like, there is a network, as I mentioned, the GigaNet, which is the academics of internet governance around the world. You have to be university affiliated, or, like, or be university affiliated, and then join or have some kind of academic affiliation. And then so for GigaNet, we have a repository of the syllabus, internet governance syllabus. And when I talk about internet governance syllabus, some people also consider content moderation. Some people consider data protection. A lot of these syllabus that you can submit. You can submit that syllabus to that repository as well. The other thing is that I interview people. These are like private, they're not broadcasted, but I interview them, and I want to do some kind of gap analysis later on, and this is just an academic ambition, but I really need, and I think that you mentioned this, that we have like gaps in teaching when like issues that relate to internet governance. And I think that this longer term project for gap analysis of what is not being taught and what should, and it should be included. And I think that and if they can, if by this coalition they can, the academics and the schools on internet governance can join the dynamic coalition on internet governance forum. I mean, they can just like contact me, and I will put them in touch. It's also on the website. They also can join that GigaNet, which is the like the academics, and we have like meetings every year, and also I'd love to interview people who are in this digital humanities, and they teach digital humanities for that gap analysis thing.
Okay.
So these are the ways. I hope they're enough.
Okay. So this is my last question. I wanted to know about your initiative, Digital Medusa. So you, after a long stint with academic and research work, I could see that you have started as your own initiative. So how that transition happened, and how do you see this landscape developing where you are right now, as well as globally?
So I really enjoyed my academic time, and doing the research and writing and talking about these various issues is very fulfilling. And also, I did not really just talk about it. I also like got involved with advocacy, and at ICANN I was the chair of non-commercial stakeholder groups. I am now the chair of the one of the co-chairs of the Christchurch Call Advisory Network, and I always like to have a hybrid role of an academic and a researcher and an advocate. And so the Digital Medusa, I started it after I left Yale Law School, and I. To be honest, I wanted to set the agenda of what I wanted to focus on, and I wanted to look at like broader digital issues that affect more than the internet. and affect our digital space. So I decided to come up with my own research advocacy kind of advisory, and it focuses on things that I think are important and are not talked about much. One is the internet sanctions and how that affects our access. The other is the pro-social governance that I told you about, because we are focusing a lot on instead of focusing on user behavior and users, we are focusing on tools to punish them. So I'm focusing on that as well. And also I like to do a lot of mobilizing, and my academic background gives me amazing tools to go about doing this independent advisory thing, because I always want to do research before I actually say something in my advocacy efforts. I want to always have like some kind of evidence, and I want to like back up my claims. And also, like, I love writing, and this allows me to write whatever blog I want and put it on my website. And there are not many viewers at the moment, but I will get there. And I gotta say that the academic background, I still know myself as an academic. It also like gave me the courage to do independent thinking and be a thinker, which I think that is very much needed. So I encourage everybody to at least do some sort of education in internet governance if they're interested, and not only just like rely on working in industry. It's an amazing, it has been an amazing journey, and I hope it works. But there is, of course, the worry of because you don't have that safety net of the academic environment when you're affiliated. So there is also that kind of like struggle, but that is also itself on its own is fulfilling in a way.
Yeah. Okay, Farzaneh, thanks a lot. I mean, it was, extremely learning experience for me also. And it was good to know you in person, your work. And I hope we stay in